There, I've had a couple people now ask for a quick little walkthrough on how I bind my coloring books, so I'm going to do that in this video. I will try to explain the steps that I'm going through as we do this. On this video, I am working through Pop Manga Flights of Fancy by Camilla D'errico. So the first step that I do is to kind of split the book in half and break the spine just a little bit, just so that you can kind of see where it's separating right in here. And then I use an X-Acto knife to just slice the book directly in half as carefully as possible. You don't want to like cut the pages, you're just trying to get through the binding of the book. Before I hit the end, I flip it around and go the opposite direction. So again, just right through the bind there. That leaves me with two halves of the book. I'll set one half aside and work on the first half. Usually at the beginning of the book, especially in these books, there is like one page that's got glue pretty far up on it. So I separate that and the cover from the rest of the book. And then I'll do another slice on that seam there as well. Very carefully again, so that you're not slicing pages. You just want to separate and then flip it again. And right along that edge there. Now I have this stuff that's still mostly bound, and then these two pages that are glued together. I'll do the same for the back side of the book as well. So again, this page is totally down. This page is glued a little bit farther up. So I'll slice right through that bit. Just like that. So now I have my two pieces. So for the cover and this piece here, I try to separate this page, and I will end up cutting it a little bit shorter than the rest of them because of the glue that's here. But I can usually salvage enough of the cover that the cover is the same length as all of these other pages, which I'll show you as I get to the cutting stage. But for now, we're going to be using the hairdryer to melt the glue a little bit so that I can separate this page without completely ruining the cover. So on this one, I did end up tearing the page a little bit here, but that'll be fine when we get down to it. So now I have the cover and the first page, which have glue here. It's quite sticky, so just be aware of where you're putting it. I got some on my floor a little bit ago. I'll put these ones aside and do the same again to the back. So here's my back. Again, it's glued. And so you want to hold it on there long enough to melt the glue, but not long enough to like burn the pages, because you can burn or scorch your pages if you hold the heat on it for too long. So it's just to loosen up the glue. this again, where I have the cover, back cover portion, and the page that was on top of it. So then I will take my paper cutter, and this one is really nice because it has a magnetic stopper. So wherever you put the stopper, when you push a page in, it'll help you align to get the cuts the same, which is just a really nice feature. So for these ones, the pages that have the glue, I will butt them up and I will just cut the glue off of this one, and then again on the back. For the rest of the pages, they'll be just slightly bigger. I'm just trying to salvage as much of the page as possible for everything else, so I don't cut off any more than what's absolutely necessary. So that was my back page and my front page. And then for the covers, I will use this little tool. It's just a flat blade, and I'll go through and scrape off usually about the top layer here and just get all of the glue off of this. And this allows me to like salvage the majority of the cover, and it will be just the right size for the rest of the pages. So now on this edge, there's no more glue. It is a little bit rough, but for me, that edge doesn't matter too much. And then I will line this up, and I'm not trying to cut the whole bind off. I just want to cut it a little bit off to even it up. It's like right about there. And so this is where the rest of the pages will end up resting. So the front one here is typically a little bit shorter, but everything after that will be the same size. And I just make sure that when I'm binding on the machine, I kind of center it to the best of my ability. So I take the front 2 pages and set those aside, and that's how I build my stacks from here on out. And then I'll take the back page and do the same thing, just removing this little piece here so that there's no glue residue left on it. And then with both the front and the back, it's kind of hard to see, but there is a faint line where the side of the book was. That's where I'm actually making my cut. So the front cover should be about the same length as it was initially. I'm just trimming off this binding edge portion. But there's a line that's scored there that you can kind of follow. And when I do that, I just make sure that the magnetic strip is even for the final one. And that's how I'm going to be measuring all of my other pages from here on out. And then that's the back cover. So I have a slightly shorter page that I'll center in here, and then my back cover, which I'll set aside. So then we're back to these pieces, which I have the front half of the book and the back half of the book. And I'll just start with the front half. And as I go, I will slice my pages and then put them upside down onto the front cover. Just make sure that you're getting your covers correct. So from here, you can use the X-Acto knife if you want to, but I do find that the books tend to tear apart fairly easily once the majority of the binding is gone. So I'll just tear off a few pieces at a time, just what I'm comfortable cutting. And then I'll line them up to that mark here that was the same as the front and back cover, which only trims off just a little bit, just enough to get off any of that extra glue that like sticks to the edge of the pages. And when you're doing multiple pages worth, you want to really get a good like push through to make sure that you're cutting through all of your pages. So I just trim along the edge, pull off any of these excess pieces, and then pull my pages out. They should be fairly even all the way around, and I just make sure that I'm putting them upside down onto the cover, and then I do my next set. So I'm usually tearing off like 4 to 5 pages. It doesn't have to be perfect. The cutter that I have, I think, is made for like 15 pages approximately. Pulled it off again. This was the front, this is the back. So I line it up, cut all the way through, and then make sure that my front is down. I'll do another 2 cuts for the first half of the book. So now we're on to the back half of the book. This is the end, this is the front. So I'll just keep tearing off, just little bits at a time, and then turning them upside down onto the front cover. So I'll pull here. Again, if you're not comfortable just pulling the pages apart, you can always take the X-Acto knife and slice down the center piece, just like this. Just being careful not to slice your pages. And then upside down, slice. And every time I do this, I am making sure to line it up with both this metal block and the base so that I've got a good squared off piece. This should be my last pull. So now I have the full book back to where it should be. And then I take the final page and the end cover. So now it's all nice and even and put back together. So now we'll get to the actual binding portion. this machine that I'm using does come with a box full of these like metal spines. And it has a really nice feature here where you can like clip your spines onto it. So then as you're hole punching, you can just directly put your pages with the holes down onto the spine. I like to bind mine with this spine instead, so I'll stack my pages here just to hold them in place, and then I'll actually end up binding it with this spine instead. So I usually do the covers separately, and it's important when you're doing this that you make sure that you are always putting them the same direction. So I'll cut them face up, and then when I put them on the spine, I will rotate it and turn it. But then you need to remember to do it with all of the preceding ones. So every page after that, I will cut face up and then turn to go down. So I'll start with this one. On this machine too, it does have a guide to show you where it's going to punch your holes and an adjustment so that you can line up where you would like it. So I will loosen that a little bit, line this up to be as centered as possible, and then I'll clamp this back down so that it's good. So then I will punch face up, both hands, and straight down. And then my holes are nice and lined up. And then I'll turn it and put it onto this guide here. And I just take a few pages at a time. It can cut through a good size stack, but I just like to be safe with my stuff. We're back to this kind of offset page where everything else is about the same size, but I have this one page that's just a little bit shorter. So when I'm putting everything else in, I'll just make sure that this guy's kind of centered as best as possible. And then I put these all in, line them up to this edge, and then push them all the way back. And then down. And then I turn them upside down and put them on the spines. I did forget that with Camilla D'errico's book, she does have pages that are like 2-page layouts. And so when I come across those, if I have any, I should check this first. If I have any, I'll turn them so that the 2-page layout is where the spine is so that my layouts stay together. I should have checked it to begin with, but I didn't. Hoping that none of them are like that. There's one. That one's a 2-page layout. This one I'm not super worried about, so I'm going to leave it top bound. But for any of them in the future, I will make sure to turn them, orient them the way that I like. So I'm going to just quickly flip through the book and see if there's any other 2-page layouts that I'm concerned with. This is a good example. So this one spreads between both pages. So when they're like that, I will turn the page so that the spine will be in the center. Like that. And then it does leave these backside ones like wonky or whatever, but it's usually fine because they're individual sheets. There's another 2-page layout. I'll turn it sideways and continue to check. There's another 2-page layout. The rest of these are fine. So then I'll just continue to punch holes. Top side up. Make sure everything is even. So now that we're on the last few, again, there's this like one wonky page at the very, very end that's going to be just a little bit shorter. So I center it in the stack and then line everything else back up. So then this whole thing lifts off. And if you like these binding clips, you would make sure to set, this has a dial for how much this crimps up here. So you make sure to set it to the correct width or diameter, which is, in this case, it's a 3/8 inch bind. These are like kind of flat on one side here. And that I try to face outward. So you shape it like a C going into the machine. Make sure everything's in there. And then you just use this to press and it'll crimp the bind together. There, like that. I am not a big fan of these spines, so I use these ones instead. And it's pretty simple to put those ones on as well. If this was what you were using, you can just use your wire clippers here to snip off the end. And your book is now complete. And like I said, like this one doesn't really matter, but for like the double pages, you've got one right side up, and then you would obviously color it this way, and then you could turn it around to color the other side. And for the dual pages, now they are centered for the spine right here, so you can just color them as usual, but I will be replacing it with a different spine, so I'll just show you how to put those ones on as well. This tool comes with this machine as well, so you just slide it through and then you can easily remove. Down to make sure everything's lined up, maybe. And this one has two different sides. So one side over here has like a pin and the side over here has a hole. I try to use the hole just so that I don't end up breaking off any of the pins. And then I just line up the holes and kind of force them through. It has gotten easier with practice. So I'm just kind of pushing and turning at the same time to try to get them all the way through. So then once they come out this other side, once they're all the way through, I'll clamp the two end ones just so that everything gets held into place. And then I trim off the excess piece here I again just use my wire clippers and cut as close to the part that I'm keeping as possible. Just like that. And then I come through and just clamp them all together. So there's, like I said, there's a pin on one side and a hole on the other. You just push it together until it snaps closed. So that, and it's the same thing. Still just opens the same way. And that's it. That's all I do for binding the books. Again, like I said, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer anything that you might have a question for.